your emotion, your limbic system, we've talked about this before, can be taking over the decision framework of evaluating true necessity. Are you actually evaluating this from a logical perspective and realizing that this isn't necessary to say, or it
Well,
is necessary and it might actually feel unkind, even though it is the kind thing to do? Most conversations about connection tell you what to think, but are easy answers ever enough? I'm Keith Richardson. With my co host Gerren Taylor, this is More in Common. Honest conversations about what keeps us apart and what doesn't have to. Come think with us. I introduced, in the spirit of just interest,
uh
Star Wars to my oldest yesterday
oh, may the
because
force be with her.
she came home from school and was like, "I wanna watch the episode with Darth Maul." And I was like, I mean, not necessarily an episode I wanna just to go watch again, but we can watch episode 1. And she was so into it and, like, super locked in,
Really?
trying to follow along, and we had to stop halfway through because of bedtime. She's like, "Can we finish it tomorrow?" It's like, don't tease me, child. Don't tease me." Um,
Threaten me with a good
so
time.
that sounded like the
Wow,
fakest
wow.
laugh I've ever given in my life.
You were giving podcast hosts really hard right there, and now you
I
have the
really
coffee
did.
too. It's like morning
I did.
anchor. Are you
I
leaving
did.
us for a a local TV show?
Just so you know, I
Here is
got recruited
Breckenridge with Keith.
by Channel 4, Channel 4 of my backyard. Anyway, let's get into it.
Well, that sounds like a much better weekend than I had because my what they call your casi algo here, like you're almost something.
You're asking me.
Yeah, right. No, well, I'm telling you, that's what it is. It's a turn of phrase, if you will. Yeah, so that's not a thing anymore, and the whole situationship kind of reminded me a lot about. By the way, this is the More Uncommon podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. This is Keith Richardson. We just be getting into conversation and
Try wait,
deep deep
let's
connections.
speed this up. Let's get to the people. Let's talk
Now you
about
want the
things
cheese man? Like,
with this thing over here. This thing that's this hair thing sticking out of the side of my head.
oh no, not a cowlick, not a cowlick on Keith. What are we gonna do?
Brutal. What are we gonna do?
But it reminded me of our conversation that we had earlier this year with Jen. I know you remember that conversation with Jen, and we were talking about
Jen Oliver for
the
new listeners.
truth. Jen Oliver, yeah. Look her up. It's a great episode. It's a great series that we sat with that. But I was sitting with what she was saying because this whole situation was like there's a cover story. There's something happening here that I'm not aware of. And when she was saying it's so profoundly unkind to tell the truth. Like, what was it? I'm gonna find the exact quote because I think it's important to read it and ha. It's so profoundly unkind to not tell the truth. You think you're sparing someone by dancing around the subject. In fact, they're operating with a fiction. Woo!
Yeah, yeah.
And that felt so real for me in that moment because I am operating with a fiction about whatever caused the. This is the end. Now it's going to turn into a 90s emo song. So I'm glad that everybody's here with
Dude,
us.
we're off the
I'm not being
rails
joking.
and it's only 3 minutes
But
in.
that's what I had a good cup of coffee, so now I am ready to rock and roll, baby. I am at the top of the mountain. But that's what we're talking about this week. We're gonna break down the truth, kindness, and the gap between. I mean, we already talked about the speaking your truth thing, but go
Yeah, I
ahead.
think the thing that stood out for me in that episode in particular, and we teased this idea of the 3 gates of honesty. And it's Is it true? Is it kind? And then you just heated up the gap between, is it necessary? And I think back to that conversation, and specifically, she, asked me the question around a situation that she uses relative to her podcast. And at times, it's it's easy to say this is true, right? Like, we can explore, is what I'm saying accurate? Big T, little t, is it mine? This can often be the easiest gate to explore, right? Even though it's probably perceived as the most difficult. The reality is what I'm telling you true in some capacity? And I can probably find a binary that evaluates that, though it's more complex than that.
You can
Is it
justify it in your
kind?
head for sure.
Yeah. Is it kind? Does it consider the other person's experience, right? Like, am I saying something that's true and I'm being nice about it? But then is it necessary? And I would argue, like, when you say the gap between, this is like the hardest one to truly explore, and whether or not you should say it. And I just reframe the story that I shared was relative to, um, my previous job and hiring somebody who was a mutual friend of a friend. And I wanted to tell the truth, right? And it was a hard thing to explore and tell that story because the biggest evaluation was, is it necessary? What is the consequence if
Yeah.
I don't? What is the consequence if I do? Who is the consequence to? Is it to them or is it to me?
And that's where the turns on, right? You pointed out very clearly, right? The true part is the easiest one because otherwise you wouldn't thought of it. You wouldn't have thought of it if it wasn't somehow so kind of true, right? Like it's the glaring thing that's out there. And the kindness, is it kind one, is the most easily manipulable one because performance wise, we can do it for our own comfort and call it virtue. Well, it's kind because I'm doing them a favor by letting them know, right? I'm helping them out by telling them about this X defect or X thing that allows them to do it better in the future, theoretically. And you're nail on the head, right? Is it necessary is the hardest one because it's a question of for whom, to what end, and do we
Yeah,
ask ourselves this question in that process?
and that's the and that, the nature of that question isn't as clean depending on the circumstance. Are we talking about live, right? Are we talking about in this moment? How quickly? Like, let's talk about the brain a little bit, right? When it's a live, tense situation, I need to tell you the truth, or it doesn't even have to be live. It's just some emotionally charged situation that is evaluating your own personal value system, your own identity, and the necessity for the other person or for self. And if you're not unpacking all of that, your emotion, your limbic system, we've talked about this before, can be taking over the decision framework of evaluating true necessity. Are you actually evaluating this from a logical perspective and realizing that this isn't necessary to say? Or it
Well,
is necessary, and it might actually feel unkind even though it is the kind thing to do.
I think it's important to point out too there that part of what happens here and giving someone the dignity of their response, as Jen put it, about telling those difficult and hard truths is that really it's a self-protection move, right? As we always say on the show, it's about
Survival.
survival. And so your brain doesn't want to feel the discomfort that you see when someone's face is upset, right? You don't wanna feel the conflict. You don't wanna be responsible, especially if you're the one delivering the message. You don't wanna be the responsible for the pain that you see on their face.
And
So we
it's,
end up lying to ourselves about our own motives in that moment to kinda cover. And the most honest version of it isn't, "I didn't tell you because I didn't wanna hurt you." It's, "I didn't tell you because I didn't wanna feel responsible for hurting you."
or I told you because I wanted to alleviate my own tension of not telling you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I
The
took the
weight of that.
responsibility, yeah, because I found out, so you need to know. And therein lies this real tricky element. If you didn't know, right? If you didn't know, would it be better if the other person knew? Whether you told them or not, you don't know in a situation, is it better for the other person? And I think one of the most complex elements of this, or complex examples of this, is if you have two friends and let's say they're married and have kids. So we have to add some
Mhm.
complexity to it. It's not just a boyfriend girlfriend that's been dating for 3 months. But you have two friends. You're friends with both, but you're closer to one than you are the other. And the one you're closest to is, you find out, is cheating on the other one. So it would be the true thing to do is tell the other one that their spouse is cheating on them. Is it a kind thing to do? You might think so, but the evaluation of necessity seems super clear in this situation. And it is not so black and white, because person A who's doing the cheating, person B doesn't know. So I now know it is now my responsibility to tell person B. What
Yeah.
is the necessity, to your point, that self protection element of it? It reminds me of the empathy paradox. We've talked about this briefly in the past. This idea that empathy is feeling somebody else's feelings. And rather than
Right.
helping them alleviate it, you feel it so intensely that you go in self protective mode and you actually don't do anything productive for the other person, but you feel you did because you felt the emotion, but you disconnect from helping them alleviate their own situation. So, in this situation, this example, am I telling person B because I feel the tension? But what if I didn't know? Would person B be better off? Would their kids be better off? Is it my responsibility to actually
Yeah.
tell that truth? Or is it person's A responsibility? And I'm closer with person A, so it's my responsibility to force them to tell them.
So
Or is it my
so
responsibility to tell person B?
you're saying it through, and I think this is a fair point. Like, is there a relational accountability aspect to this? Like, in the sense of, it's not whether or not someone can handle the information. Putting the kindness part aside for a second, right? It's more of
Right,
like,
right.
do I have a duty in this moment to that person? Am I serving their interests, or am I serving my discomfort with having this information? What do you think?
I'm not sure I'm clear on the question. Ask that a different way.
Well, I understand kind of like what you're saying about it's not the right thing always to divulge, for instance, infidelity. But do you think that there is a type of relationship or relational accountability where you do have that duty to tell them, even if it's not
I'm sure
kind?
there is. Right? I'm sure there is. And I think the element of kindness there too is often sometimes just how we say it, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
it, clear as kind, as Brene Brown says, right? Being clear is also the kind factor, but how we say it, how we deliver it versus being an asshole about it, right? Like that has triggering and protective responses and reactions. But when we think about that responsibility, there are absolutely situations where the necessity is on you. It's important. But this is the complexity of honesty because withholding has degrading effects on relationships too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
There's
absolutely.
so if we think about some of the research that kind of supports this synthesis, we think about uh, John Gottman's idea of stonewalling, where chronic withdrawal of information has a corrosive effect on relationships. Whereas James Pennebaker's disclosure timing it's not necessarily withdrawal, but it's timing that information correctly for the other person based on when it's best for them to receive it. So the necessity element here is a reflection of where the other person is. And I think this is the key element. Is it necessary for them? And this is going back to your question. Am I relieving my own tension? Or am I framing this up from a timing standpoint? Is withholding actually the appropriate thing to do in this particular situation? Or is it just withholding for a period of time until we figure out when the best time is to actually share the honesty of whatever it may be?
When you're talking about the degradation of the relationship from the withholding, and I think that's an important point because what it does mean in some ways is that you're making a decision about what they can and cannot handle. You are putting a judgment upon their ability to deal with whatever truth it is that you're withholding, to make a right decision about it, to think through it, and denying them the agency I think that honestly people deserve in those situations, right? Like I always say to my friends, like, I don't care what your relationship is, as long as everybody who's in it knows what's happening and agrees to it, right? Like I don't you monogamy, non-monogamy, blah blah blah. The only thing that really sucks about it is lying. I think I think that everybody is an adult and they can make decisions about what it is. But when you're exerting this kind of withholding information in order to not hurt somebody, you're essentially exerting control over them with a kindness wrapper, with a wrapper of protection.
Yeah.
And the other part about that is what you were saying about choosing the time and the place. And that's where it comes back to the kind of three gates again, right? Because it doesn't just filter for honesty in that sense. It also you do have a filter for what we were talking about earlier, your relational accountability to the person. So like how you choose to structure your words, structure your tone, uh it's not just about the truth of what you're saying, it's about the deliverability of the message. And I say this all the time, right? Like as a communicator, it's not just what I say that's important. It's the audience's ability to receive it. Who cares? I can talk up here for 15, 20 minutes, but if I'm using words that are all too SAT or too technical for people to understand and no one can walk away with an understanding of the meaning of the message, then what's the point? You just wasted your time. And so
Yeah.
there is also that balance that must be struck. And again, these things aren't always easy in the moment, but I do believe that asking ourselves this question of who is this serving is an important part of achieving the or getting away from the gap, right?
Yeah. I
Shrinking that
think
gap.
you bring up a really good point about owning the other person's like taking I'm gonna I think it can be used as a mechanism of control. I wanna be I wanna be a little softer in that because it's not necessarily taking control. Um, because there is an element of if I didn't know and they don't know and I find out, what's the difference? The difference in that equation is now that I know. But just knowing doesn't make it necessary to tell somebody else. And I mean this broadly speaking relative to
Yeah,
honest
yeah,
communication. It's not
yeah,
necessarily just simply stating clear is kind, right? Being clear
right.
is right. That is a kind way of delivering a message, but it's not necessarily true. So again, the three gates, but the key question, is it necessary? And when we think about something you said that I think is so important, we talk about the Dunbar number. We're going to talk about it a lot as we go along, just as a reference
That's like
point,
your
not
second favorite
necessarily.
thing.
It's, it really is. It's a good reference point, not to anchor so much on the absolute research of the Dunbar number, but the nature of personal connections and the concentric circles of social influence, right?
Yeah,
Our closest
yeah, yeah.
relations versus those. Necessity also pairs with the nature of the relationship that you're in. And it could
Yeah, no,
very well be, if I'm not the person to tell this person, maybe they're not as close of a relationship as I think they are. And recognizing that element of social dynamics relieves the pressure of responsibility, because we are so wildly connected to so
that's
many people
yeah.
in life that we often, I know for me personally, I absolutely try to take on more responsibility than it's worth. A recent example, and this isn't necessarily as part of Truth Kind, we talked about the friend that took his life a couple of weeks ago. And as soon as I found out, in the way that I found out, I immediately was like, I need to organize all of the things for his wife. That was my
Mm.
immediate response. And my wife, who was so grounding for me in that situation, was like, why? You're not that close with them, right? Like, you don't even have the wife's phone number. How are you going to organize anything or do anything for them? And it's uncomfortable, because we all, I don't want to say we all, but generally, like, our neurology and our physiological makeup is for compassion and kindness. That's how we build social ecosystems. We want to do nice things for other people, but we're not always the one responsible for those things. And the necessity is such an important evaluation in honest communication. And it's really, really, really hard to get honest about that decision before you decide to withhold, because now you're talking about relational turbulence theory with Denise Solomon relative to the ambiguity of close relationships, which can cause distress over time. Like, go ahead.
And to make it,
Sorry.
you know, simple and clear though, because you're rolling again. You're over there filibustering. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey,
No, I know. I love it. I love it when you do. You get so excited sometimes. No.
I get so intimate.
But the question of withholding does require more than just that more might it hurt question, to your point. It does factor deeply into the relationship you have, because ultimately you don't want to be in a situation where they find out later that you withheld this information and they go, "Why didn't you tell me?
What a
You should have told me."
and isn't that the foundational future self-protective element? I don't want them to think
Well,
I withheld from them.
it comes crashing right into the justification for why you withheld in the first place, right? To avoid that hurt. But now it's worse because it's not just them being hurt, it's also an anger towards you for withholding in the first place. Like
But I'll
it
also
it
give
can
you the flip
exacerbate
time,
the first situation.
and I give you the flip side to that is is me telling them necessary only to prevent them from hating me in the future? So am
I
I
just wanna be
protecting a
clear that I am
future
that guy.
state? How so?
I will tell you. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah.
If it's
And
something that I
and
feel like you need to know. And you know what? You're right. It hasn't always gone well. There are times
this
where
is
people are like,
but I'm gonna, so that you just said something, and I want, I want to pin on this just to reflect on the complexity and to move into how we actually make this decision. But you said, I'm going to tell you something I think you need to know. And this is inherent to the framework of, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? That necessity actually needs deliberative analysis. It doesn't have to be a weeks long of deliberate analysis. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a long time. Like, I've got to figure this out. But sometimes it's a quick, easy decision. I think it's necessary. And we don't always get it right. And when we
Also true.
don't get it right, that leads to what we do with it from there. But sometimes we do have to take a risk. And I don't think it's always necessary, going back to the cheating. If I tell you and your spouse doesn't, what are the consequences? Are you going to get divorced? What are the consequences to your kids? All of those things. I could still ask the question, what are the consequences if I don't tell you? You're going to go on not knowing, but your kids are going to go on not knowing. And maybe you find out 10 years from now and it just shatters everybody's position in life. But maybe the kids are more emotionally aware to handle it at that time versus now. That could, like, there's
Yeah.
so many variables to that decision to just simply state, I'm going to be the one to tell you, has inherent self-value and self-worth that's not necessarily considering the other person. And that leads to, am I telling you for me or am I telling you for them?
Well, I there is that is fair too, because I think one of the things that we haven't quite touched on is when that knowledge becomes a power and that honesty becomes a weapon, like the aggression with the philosophical cover, you know. Uh Telling somebody a truth that you know, which may not be working through the three gates at all in some ways. Well, it's going to be true more than likely, right? But kind of necessary, questionable. But you're using the truth to blunt some other attack maybe, or criticism, or it's almost like a Trojan horse, right? Where you're using radical
Mm,
honesty. I'm just being honest. I'm just keeping it real, keeping it 100 about what's going on. And even in the applicable cases of like seeing infidelity, right? Like people will be like, "Oh, well, you gotta know," and not in that tone of what we were saying, where you're balancing the tone, the timing, you're balancing the criteria. You've done some reflectional analysis about how to deliver this message and the necessity of delivering this message, and even to the extent that I think that reflectional analysis should, include the veracity, based on what you actually saw or versus what you've heard, right? Because there are different levels of that go into every specific situation.
yeah. You
But
might only have one side of the
it is
story. And
right. a- And it's
yeah.
important to factor that in. And so when I'm saying I'm that guy, it is because to your point, which I did not, I don't think, make bright enough, I have gone through that. Right? Like if I'm gonna do
Right.
it, it's because
You
I have made those thoughts about, all right, what do I know? What do I not know? What's the situation of their relationship? Like, is it a serious relationship where you should know, or are you guys just hanging out? You know what I mean? And I think the delivery, it's truth to me is all about the delivery. Because even
mm,
what you know is still in some ways little t truth. I have heard of
mm,
times where people are like, and not to over index on infidelities, where people were like, they know they have an arrangement, but they didn't want everybody in the world to know that they had an arrangement. And so you're
mm.
just,
And
out
now
there
you're like,
trying to be
"Oh, I'm
truthful and
I'm trying
honest,
to be the hero." That's right. Like,
and
I'm
you
the
put your finger in
guy
the
that's
pudding
gotta
that you shouldn't have.
expose the injustice. I'm exposing it. And, like,
Yeah.
I think it comes down to this very fundamental principle, and I wanna ask you a question to close this out. Um,
Yeah.
is this idea that we're in this episode, we're not asking whether or not we should tell the truth. It's really, we're asking whether you've been honest about why you want to.
Mhm.
And how you said you go through that, like, if you were to give a quick piece of advice on helping people navigate, recognizing this is complex. It's not an easy decision, even though some might think, "Yep, I'll destroy the relationship for my own honest value. I need to tell the truth." Like, how do you go through that? Like, what's one or two things that you could do in that
I
situation?
tend to index on honesty, right? Because maybe it is selfish, but I don't like to carry secrets in that sense. I tend to index on honesty. But I do think that I also try not to underestimate people. I do think it is a serious disservice to assume that someone can't handle the thing that's actually happening that's real life. I wholeheartedly agree with Jen that I think it's frankly rude to to try to mask this as kindness, that you're being kind to someone, but you're really taking away their agency to make an informed decision about what they want to do. So that's how I frame it.
I
I
love that.
usually think
And
about how much information does this person have to make the right decision.
I think that's real, and I think I certainly lean towards, um, being honest, and in sharing rather than withholding because the research is extensive on the corrosive element of withholding. But I also believe that if you are in an evaluation criteria of necessity, like my spouse, I'm going to tell her the truth all the time. And, there are certain times where it's like, yesterday, I was mad at her, and it was just not a battle worth fighting. It wasn't necessary, and I could manage my own emotional response around why I was angry. I don't need to create more tension for her as she's looking on going on a long trip. So there are times where it's like, okay, I'm just it's just not necessary because it's my own emotional expression that I need to explore versus telling her why she's at fault for that emotional expression. And I think there's
Mhm.
value in exploring that necessity in a real meaningful way. But in some of the bigger decisions, if you're not will if you've determined that it's not your place, then for me it's reevaluating where the relationship is. Like maybe they're not in my inner circle and I really thought differently before, but maybe I'm going to
Yeah.
reconsider how I frame that relationship in a more meaningful way. And look, I'm going to say this last thing. I think this is a great place for AI in sitting to be able to explore the idea without consequence or retribution, to be able to bounce ideas off of some non emotional existence in order to evaluate the consequences of saying it, not saying it, to really determine the necessity formula for yourself rather than just sitting with it all by yourself all the time. So,
Well, that's not a bad way to walk out of this. I'm gonna say check your motives.
check your
I don't know why
motives. Are you
it
doing
sounded
it for
so
you or are
gangsters.
you
I don't know
doing it
why
for
it needed
them?
to sound like Ice Cube doing it, but it just felt right at the moment. Anyway, this is the More Uncommon podcast. I'm Garen Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. It was another jam-packed conversation here. We hope you enjoyed. Make sure that you like, share, comment, send it to a friend. Definitely watch us on YouTube. Give us a like on YouTube. We love that. You can see Keith's Cowlick if you that's on YouTube this week.
I'm turning my head so you can't.
There you go. All right, it's been fun. We'll see you all next week. Peace out.